Olivia Mitchell sat motionless behind the wheel of her rented sedan, hands trembling and heart racing. The evening air of Beacon Hill, Boston's most affluent neighborhood, felt thick with betrayal. Her wedding ring caught the fading sunlight. As she gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching as Scott, the man who had promised her forever just 8 months ago, parked his Mercedes in front of a stunning brownstone with ornate iron railings. "Working late," he had texted her. A simple lie that had unraveled everything. Something deep inside her, an instinct sharper than reason, had urged her to follow him tonight. What she witnessed wasn't mere suspicion. It was revelation in its cruelest form. As Scott approached the building, the front door opened. A woman stepped out, poised and striking in a tailored black dress. The familiarity in their greeting sent ice through Olivia's veins. "Rebecca," she whispered, recognizing the face immediately. Rebecca Wilson, the woman who had smiled warmly at their wedding, who had offered a toast to their happiness. Scott's colleague, he had called her, just a business associate. But the intimate way his hand rested on the small of Rebecca's back as they disappeared inside told a different story entirely. This wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal woven into the fabric of her marriage from the beginning. The drive back to their Beacon Heights estate was a blur of streetlights and silent tears. The sprawling mansion that awaited her, with its manicured gardens and imposing columns, had never felt like home. Now it felt like a beautiful prison built on lies. Olivia had left everything behind for Scott. Growing up in the coastal town of Hanalei Bay, Hawaii, in a modest home filled with the scent of her mother's laulau and the constant melody of the Pacific Ocean, she'd never yearned for marble floors or crystal chandeliers. Love had been enough, but love, it seemed, had lied. She left behind her family's small restaurant business. Her culture even allowed her name, Olivia Kamealoha, to be gently discouraged in favor of Mitchell. "It's better for business connections," Scott had suggested, and she, believing in his vision of their shared future, had agreed. From the very beginning, the Mitchell family estate had felt like a stage where she didn't know her lines. Scott's mother, Eleanor Mitchell, Boston socialite and matriarch of the Mitchell shipping empire, had greeted her with cool civility and calculating eyes. His sisters, Vanessa and Catherine, with their identical blonde bobs and Harvard degrees, had assessed her like a peculiar museum exhibit. Every morning, Olivia would wake early, prepare tea the way her grandmother had taught her, arrange breakfast with care and attention to detail. Only to hear Eleanor's dismissive voice, "We have staff for that, dear. This isn't a diner." The slight pause before diner, carrying volumes of unspoken judgment. She quickly learned that in the Mitchell household, tradition and kindness were purely ornamental, and she was just another display piece, carefully placed but never truly seen. The whispers began long before tonight's revelation. At charity galas and family gatherings, they floated like poison in champagne flutes. "She's not going to last." It was only because of the inheritance condition. "She's simple, easy to control." Scott never corrected them. He stayed silent, watching the slow erosion of her dignity with increasingly indifferent eyes. In recent months, he had grown more absent, more distracted, more secretive. But what ultimately shattered her illusions wasn't his coldness. It was a tiny, forgotten object, a wallet, left carelessly on the marble kitchen island one Thursday morning 3 weeks ago. Inside, a silver key. Small, plain, but she recognized it immediately. It belonged to the locked drawer in his home office, the one he always kept secured. That day, with her heart pounding and hands shaking, she had waited until he left for an important meeting. Then she had used the key. What she found inside that drawer was the end of her naivety. Legal documents, property deeds, a will. Every asset, properties, stocks, wealth was assigned to Eleanor, Vanessa, and Catherine Mitchell. Not a mention of Olivia, not a clause, not even a token consideration. She wasn't a partner. She was a placeholder, chosen for her lack of connections, her lack of wealth, her lack of resistance. It was never love. It was strategy. She had been married to fulfill a condition tied to the Mitchell fortune, the requirement that Scott be married before his 35th birthday to receive his grandfather's trust fund. She had been convenient, exotic enough to be interesting at parties, but not powerful enough to pose any threat. Tonight, as she parked the car in the curved driveway and stared up at the imposing facade of Mitchell Manor, something inside Olivia shifted. Not rage, clarity. A deep, resolute clarity that illuminated every corner of her situation. She walked through the grand foyer, past the original Renoir that Eleanor was so proud of, up the sweeping staircase to her bedroom, a room she had never shared with Scott, despite his promises that the arrangement was temporary. From her closet, she pulled out an ornate wooden box handcrafted by her grandfather. Inside lay her wedding dowry, gold bracelets, pearl necklaces, jade pendants, family treasures that by both Hawaiian tradition and American law belonged solely to her. With steady fingers, she reached for her phone and dialed a number she had saved weeks ago after finding those documents. When the voice answered, she spoke with quiet determination. "Mr. Harrison, this is Olivia Mitchell. I'd like to make an appointment for tomorrow." Alexander Harrison was reputed to be the best divorce attorney in Massachusetts. His response was immediate and professional. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell, 9 a.m. "Perfect," she replied, gazing out the window at Boston's glittering skyline. "And Mr. Harrison, I'll be bringing evidence." When she ended the call, Olivia noticed something she hadn't seen before. Reflected in the window glass was not the broken woman she had expected, but someone stronger, someone with a fire in her eyes that reminded her of her grandmother, who had built a business from nothing after losing everything. From her drawer, she removed a small notebook and began to write, documenting everything: dates, conversations, discoveries, the story of her marriage, now viewed through the lens of truth. Each word was both painful and liberating. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, Olivia finally closed the notebook. Her plan was taking shape. Not a plan of vengeance, but of justice. Of reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Not just material possessions, but her dignity, her identity, her future. She would need allies, information, strategy. The Mitchells had built their empire on calculated moves and strategic alliances. She would have to be smarter, more careful, more patient. But for the first time since she'd walked down the aisle in a dress that Eleanor had selected, Olivia felt a sense of purpose crystallizing inside her. "You underestimated me," she whispered. To the empty room, her voice gaining strength with each word. "That will be your mistake." Outside her window, Boston was waking up, and so was she. Alexander Harrison's office embodied old Boston money, dark mahogany, leather-bound law books, and windows overlooking the historic Common. At precisely 9 o'clock, Olivia Mitchell stepped into this sanctuary of legal power, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit that had been buried in the back of her closet. Not one of the designer outfits Scott and Eleanor had insisted on filling her wardrobe with, but something she had chosen herself. "Mrs. Mitchell," Harrison greeted her, his silver hair and sharp eyes giving him the appearance of a hawk. "Please have a seat." She placed her grandmother's wooden box on his desk, alongside a leather portfolio filled with documents. "Before we begin, Mr. Harrison, I need to know something. Will you represent me even if it means going against the Mitchell family?" Harrison leaned back, studying her with newfound interest. "You wouldn't be the first person to challenge them, but I have to ask, are you prepared for what that means? The Mitchells don't just have money, they have influence." "They also have secrets," Olivia replied, opening the portfolio, "and I've been collecting them." For the next hour, she methodically presented what she had discovered, the hidden terms of the inheritance, the evidence of financial deception, the property in Rebecca Wilson's name purchased 2 years ago, before Olivia had even met Scott. "He planned this from the beginning," she explained, her voice steady despite the pain behind the words. "The Mitchell shipping merger with Wilson International was contingent on securing the family trust. Scott needed to be married. Rebecca Wilson was already married to someone else, so he found me." Harrison reviewed the documents with practiced efficiency, occasionally asking questions that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Finally, he closed the portfolio and looked directly at her. "He underestimated you," he said simply. "Let's make that his mistake." From that day forward, Olivia began living two lives. In one, she remained the graceful, compliant wife, attending charity functions on Scott's arm, smiling at his business associates, maintaining the perfect facade. In the other, she was meticulously building her case, gathering information, and preparing for the reckoning to come. She learned to move through the Mitchell mansion like a ghost, photographing financial records when the house was empty, recording conversations that revealed the family's true feelings about her, following the patterns of Scott's deceptions with clinical precision. Each lie became a file. Each secret meeting with Rebecca documented evidence. It was during this careful documentation that Olivia found an unexpected ally, Maya Thompson, a young member of the household staff who had been working at the mansion for 3 years. Quiet and observant, Maya had seen more than anyone realized. One evening, as Olivia was photographing bank statements in Scott's study, Maya appeared in the doorway. Instead of alarm, Olivia saw recognition in the young woman's eyes. "You deserve better than how they treat you," Maya said simply, stepping into the room and closing the door. "I can help." "Why would you risk your job for me?" Olivia asked, wary of traps after months of deception. Maya's expression hardened. "Because you're the only one who ever looks at me like I'm human. The only one who bothered to learn my name, who asks about my son." She hesitated, then added, "And because Mr. Mitchell tried to, let's just say he doesn't take rejection well." That night, their alliance was formed. Maya became Olivia's eyes and ears when she couldn't be present, carefully tracking Scott's movements, conversations, and visitors. She had access to areas of the house Olivia couldn't enter without raising suspicion, and could move freely among the staff who knew every Mitchell secret. "The Mitchells forget we exist," Maya explained one afternoon as they met secretly in Olivia's private sitting room. "They talk freely in front of us like we're furniture. We know things even their lawyers don't know." With Maya's help, the pattern of Scott's deception became clearer. Rebecca Wilson wasn't his only secret. In Cambridge, near Harvard's campus, another woman, Jessica Daniels, a graduate student, was being housed in a luxury apartment under the guise of a scholarship program funded by Mitchell Shipping. That woman, too, believed she was special to Scott. The deception was wider, deeper, crueler than Olivia had imagined. Her initial heartbreak hardened into something like armor around her heart. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. It was about justice. "There's more," Maya said one evening, placing a thick folder on Olivia's desk. "The Mitchells aren't just using you. They've done this before." The folder contained newspaper, clippings, old photographs, and court records. 5 years earlier, another woman, Gabriela Mendoza, a talented architect from Chicago, had been briefly married to Scott. The marriage had ended mysteriously, with Gabriela signing away all rights to the Mitchell fortune in exchange for a settlement that had bought her silence. She had disappeared from Boston shortly afterward, her promising career mysteriously stalled. "They destroy people," Maya whispered. "They've been doing it for generations." Just when Olivia thought she had uncovered the full extent of the deception, an anonymous text message appeared on her phone. "Not just Rebecca and Jessica. Ask about the condo in Miami." Following the lead, she discovered yet another shadow life, another string of lies. In Miami's exclusive South Beach, Scott maintained a luxurious penthouse where he entertained not just women, but business associates who would never be welcomed at the formal Mitchell estate, people Scott and his family publicly denounced but privately courted for their connections and influence. Through it all, Scott remained arrogant, unaware of the storm brewing beneath his carefully curated life. He continued to treat Olivia with casual dismissal, assuming her compliance was guaranteed by her isolation and dependence. One evening, after returning late from another business dinner, he made a critical mistake. Perhaps emboldened by whiskey, or simply too confident in his control, he mocked her. "When I'm done with you," he said, loosening his tie as he passed her in the hallway, "you'll be back selling pineapples with your family." Nobody here will even remember your name." Olivia didn't react with anger or hurt. Instead, she smiled, a small, knowing smile that should have warned him, had he been paying attention. "Is that what happened to Gabriella?" she asked quietly. For just a moment, shock registered on his face, quickly masked by practiced indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't," Olivia replied, turning toward her room. "Good night, Scott." 2 days. Later, she made her move. She invited Scott into his study, a room where she was rarely welcome. He entered with his usual confident stride, expecting perhaps an apology or a plea for attention. Instead, he found Olivia seated behind his desk, Maya standing quietly by the door, and Alexander Harrison occupying the leather armchair usually reserved for Scott's most important guests. "What is this?" Scott demanded, his gaze darting between them. Olivia gestured toward Harrison, who stood and handed Scott a thick envelope. "You're being served, Mr. Mitchell. Your wife is filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity, financial deception, and breach of marital contract." Scott's expression transformed from confidence to confusion to barely controlled rage in the span of seconds. "This is ridiculous. You have nothing." "On the contrary," Harrison replied smoothly, "Mrs. Mitchell has provided extensive documentation of your activities with Ms. Wilson, Ms. Daniels, and various others, not to mention the creative accounting regarding the family trust that I'm certain the IRS would find fascinating." Scott turned to Maya, his voice dangerous. "You're fired. Get out of my house." "Actually," Olivia interrupted, "Maya doesn't work for you anymore. She works for me. And as of this morning, she's protected as a witness in our case." For the first time since she had met him, Olivia saw Scott Mitchell truly afraid. Not of her, never of her, but of what she knew, of what she could prove, of what she could destroy. "You taught me I had no worth," Olivia said, rising from the chair. "Today you'll learn the cost of your own deception." As Scott lunged toward the desk, reaching for the documents, Harrison smoothly stepped between them. "I wouldn't advise that, Mr. Mitchell. Assaulting your wife in front of witnesses would only strengthen our case." "How you can't do this?" Scott hissed, his handsome face contorted with fury. "Do you know who my family is? What we can do to you?" Olivia looked at him calmly, feeling a strange mix of pity and determination. "Yes, Scott, I know exactly who your family is. That's why I've been so thorough." As Harrison led Scott from the room to continue their discussion somewhere more appropriate, Olivia remained behind, her hand resting on the desk that had been the center of Scott's power. For the first time in months, she felt something like peace, not happiness, not yet, but the quiet satisfaction of standing up for herself. "It's just the beginning," Maya warned, coming to stand beside her. "The Mitchells won't go down without a fight." "I'm counting on it," Olivia replied, looking out the window at the Boston skyline, "because neither will I." The Mitchell family responded to Olivia's legal action with swift and calculated precision. Within 48 hours, Eleanor Mitchell had mobilized a team of Boston's most ruthless divorce attorneys, and the house staff, excluding Maya, had been replaced with people loyal to the family. Security systems were changed, access was restricted, the mansion transformed from a cold home into an impenetrable fortress. Olivia had anticipated this. The night after serving Scott, she had moved into a small but elegant apartment that Harrison had secured for her in Back Bay, taking only her personal belongings and the evidence she had gathered. Maya had joined her, occupying the second bedroom with her 5-year-old son, Elijah. "They'll try to isolate you first," Harrison explained during their strategy meeting in his office. "Then discredit you. The Mitchells have been managing their public image for generations." As predicted, the first salvo came through the press. The Boston Herald Society page ran a thinly veiled piece about gold diggers targeting Boston's elite families, complete with references to exotic outsiders and cultural incompatibilities. Though Olivia wasn't named directly, the implications were clear to anyone familiar with Boston society. Next came the financial squeeze. Olivia's credit cards were cancelled. Her joint accounts with Scott were frozen. The generous allowance she had received monthly which she had been quietly setting aside in a separate account, suddenly stopped. "They think money is their best weapon," Olivia remarked to Maya as they reviewed their situation. "They don't realize I grew up with almost nothing. I know how to live simply." The legal proceedings moved forward with the deliberate pace of high-stakes litigation. Depositions were scheduled. Financial disclosures were demanded. The Mitchell family lawyers filed motion after motion, seeking to delay, to complicate, to exhaust both Olivia's resources and her resolve. What they hadn't counted on was her preparation, or her determination. During a particularly tense deposition, Scott's lead attorney, Richard Donovan, attempted to paint Olivia as a calculating opportunist who had married for money. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, his tone condescending, "can you explain why someone with your background would be interested in a man whose lifestyle was so different from your own?" Before Harrison could object, Olivia leaned forward. "By background, do you mean my education at the University of Hawaii, where I graduated summa cum laude? Or my family's business that has operated successfully for 3 generations? Or perhaps my cultural heritage, which values honor and honesty above material wealth?" Her smile was polite, but her eyes were steel. "I married Scott because I believed him when he spoke of love and partnership. My mistake wasn't marrying him, it was trusting him." Donovan faltered, unused to witnesses who didn't cower under his intimidation. "Let me be more direct, Mrs. Mitchell. What financial assets did you bring to this marriage?" "I'm glad you asked," Olivia replied, nodding to Harrison, who produced a file. "Here is a complete accounting of my dowry, valued by independent appraisers at approximately $300,000. These cultural treasures have been in my family for generations. According to both Hawaiian tradition and Massachusetts law, they remain my separate property." She paused, looking directly at Scott. "Unlike the Mitchell family trust, which we've discovered was misrepresented in our prenuptial agreement, making those portions potentially invalid." The deposition room fell silent. It was the first public mention of potential problems with the Mitchell family trust, the cornerstone of their wealth and influence. Later that evening, Harrison called Olivia with news. "They want to negotiate." Privately, the meeting was set for neutral ground, a conference room at the Four Seasons Hotel. Eleanor Mitchell arrived first, impeccably dressed in Chanel, her silver hair arranged in its usual perfect coif. For the first time, Olivia noticed the strain around her mother-in-law's eyes, the slight tremor in her manicured hands. "This has gone far enough," Eleanor began without preamble once they were alone. "Name your price." Olivia regarded her calmly. "This isn't about money, Eleanor." "Don't be naive," Eleanor snapped. "Everything is about money, especially marriage. Is that what you taught Scott? That relationships are just transactions?" Eleanor's laugh was brittle. "I taught Scott to protect what generations of Mitchells have built. We offered you a privileged life most women would kill for. A beautiful home, financial security, social position. Everything except respect," Olivia countered. "Everything except honesty." "Respect?" Eleanor's voice rose slightly. "You were a means to an end. The trust required Scott to be married. You were convenient, presentable enough for society functions, exotic enough to be interesting, and we thought, malleable enough to accept your role." The brutal honesty was almost refreshing after months of pretense. "And the other women? Rebecca? Jessica? Were they also part of your plan?" Something flickered across Eleanor's composed features. "Business requires flexibility. The Wilsons control shipping routes we need. The Daniels family has political connections. Scott was managing those relationships." "By sleeping with them?" Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be crude. Men have needs. As long as he was discreet." "He wasn't," Olivia interrupted. "And now it's going to cost you, not just financially, but your precious reputation." For the first time, uncertainty crept into Eleanor's expression. "What do you want?" "Justice," Olivia replied simply. "Recognition of what was taken from me. Acknowledgement of the deception. And yes, fair compensation, not just for me, but for Gabriela Mendoza and any other women your family has used and discarded." Eleanor's face paled. "You know about Gabriella." "I know everything," Olivia said quietly. "Every affair, every manipulated business deal, every tax irregularity concerning the family trust. Did you really think I would come into this fight unprepared?" What followed was 3 hours of intense negotiation, with lawyers stepping in and out as needed. By the end, a preliminary agreement had been drafted. Olivia would receive a settlement equal to 20% of Scott's personal wealth, not the family trust, plus the Cambridge property and full ownership of a small shipping subsidiary. That had been part of her dowry agreement, but never transferred to her name. In exchange, she would sign a confidentiality agreement covering specific aspects of the Mitchell family business, but notably, not Scott's personal conduct or the circumstances of their marriage. "This is the best offer you'll get," Eleanor said as she prepared to leave. "If you push for more, we'll ensure you spend years in litigation." Olivia studied the older woman, seeing not just the formidable matriarch, but the desperate mother trying to salvage what she could from her son's mistakes. "I don't need to push for more, Eleanor, because money isn't my only leverage." Later that night, as Olivia reviewed the draft agreement with Harrison in her apartment, Maya returned from picking up Elijah from his after-school program. The boy's bright energy filled the space as he showed Olivia his art project, a colorful drawing of what appeared to be 3 figures standing in front of a building. "That's you," he explained, pointing to the tallest figure. "And that's me and Mommy, and that's our restaurant." Maya looked embarrassed. "He knows we've been talking about maybe opening a place someday. He has a big imagination." Olivia studied the child's drawing, something shifting inside her. "Actually, Elijah, that's a wonderful idea. Every good plan needs a picture to start with." After Maya had put her son to bed, Olivia shared the preliminary settlement terms with her. "It's enough to start over," she concluded, "but I'm not sure it's enough for justice." Maya considered this. "The Mitchells care about 2 things, money and reputation. You've already threatened both. What more can you do?" "Expose the pattern," Olivia replied, her mind racing with possibilities. "Make sure they can never do this to anyone else." The next day brought an unexpected development. As Olivia was leaving Harrison's office, her phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was hesitant, with a slight accent. "Is this Olivia Mitchell? My name is Gabriela Mendoza. I heard you've been looking for me." They met at a quiet cafe in Cambridge, far from Mitchell territory. Gabriela was striking, tall, and elegant with intelligent eyes that carried the shadow of old pain. She listened intently as Olivia explained her situation, occasionally nodding in recognition. "They isolated me too," Gabriela confirmed, "made me feel like I was crazy for expecting honesty in my marriage. Eleanor orchestrated everything, the prenup, the settlement, the confidentiality agreement that prevented me from even explaining to potential employers why my career suddenly stalled." "Why are you breaking that agreement now?" Olivia asked. Gabriela's smile was sad but determined. "Because 5 years of silence is enough. Because I rebuilt my life despite them, and I'm finally strong enough to face them. And because you're the first person who's tried to find the truth, instead of accepting their version of it." By the time they parted, a new alliance had formed, one that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in Olivia's battle with the Mitchells. That evening, as Olivia sat on her apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint Boston's skyline, in gold, her phone chimed with a text from Scott. "Mother says you're being reasonable. Let's end this quickly and quietly." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she thought about Elijah's drawing, about Gabriela's quiet resilience, about Maya's loyalty, about her own family back in Hawaii who had taught her that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or social position. Her reply was simple: "I'll see you in court tomorrow." Because while Eleanor Mitchell might be willing to negotiate a financial settlement, Olivia now understood that the full measure of justice would require something more than money. It would require truth. And the truth was something the Mitchells had avoided for generations. Tomorrow would change that forever. The Suffolk County Courthouse stood as a monument to justice, its granite facade and imposing columns a stark contrast to the modern glass towers of downtown Boston. Inside Courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was charged with tension. as Judge Patricia Hendricks reviewed the documents before her. Before we proceed with today's hearing, Judge Hendricks began, peering over her reading glasses at the attorneys, I want to address the motion to seal these proceedings. Her gaze shifted to the Mitchell family's legal team. Mr. Donovan, while I understand your client's concerns about privacy, this is a matter of public record, unless you can demonstrate compelling reasons for confidentiality. Richard Donovan rose smoothly, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, the Mitchell family's business interests extend internationally. Publicizing the details of their financial arrangements could harm not just the family, but hundreds of employees who depend on Mitchell Shipping's continued success. Alexander Harrison stood next. Your Honor, if I may, the motion to seal is not about protecting business interests, but about concealing a pattern of behavior that should be brought to light. Mrs. Mitchell is prepared to respect legitimate business confidentiality, but not at the expense of truth. Judge Hendricks considered both arguments before responding. I'm denying the motion to seal at this time. Let's proceed with the hearing. The gallery buzzed with whispers. Several journalists who had been following the high-profile divorce leaned forward eagerly. In the front row, Eleanor Mitchell sat rigid beside her daughters, their expressions carefully controlled. Scott occupied the defendant's table with his legal team, looking more annoyed than concerned. On the opposite side, Olivia sat between Harrison and his associate, Jessica Chen. Behind her, Maya and Gabriela Mendoza offered silent support. As Harrison presented their case, methodically outlining the evidence of Scott's deception and infidelity, Olivia watched her husband's face. There was no remorse, no shame, only calculation as he whispered occasionally to Donovan. When Harrison introduced the financial documents revealing discrepancies in the trust accounting, Scott's expression finally changed, a flicker of alarm crossing his features. Eleanor Mitchell leaned forward, her knuckles white against her designer handbag. Your Honor, Harrison continued, we'd like to call our first witness, Gabriela Mendoza. Donovan was on his feet immediately. Objection, Ms. Mendoza has no relevance to these proceedings. If Ms. Mendoza's testimony establishes a pattern of behavior material to this case, I'll allow it, Judge Hendricks ruled. Proceed. Gabriela took the stand with quiet dignity, swearing her oath in a clear voice. Under Harrison's gentle questioning, she described her brief marriage to Scott Mitchell 5 years earlier, the whirlwind courtship, the lavish wedding, and the gradual realization that she had been chosen primarily because of her family's connections to South American shipping interests. When did you first suspect your marriage was not what it appeared to be? Harrison asked. Gabriela's voice remained steady. 3 months after our wedding, I found documents showing that Scott had been involved with Victoria Palmer, his current financial director, throughout our engagement. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He simply said it was business and that I needed to grow up and understand how things worked in his world. And what happened when you filed for divorce? Eleanor Mitchell contacted me personally. She explained that if I pursued a public divorce, the Mitchell family would ensure I never worked in architecture again. They would use their connections to block me professionally. Gabriela paused. As evidence of what they could do, they had already contacted my primary client and caused them to cancel our contract. I was given a settlement offer contingent on my silence. And you accepted? I had no choice at the time. I signed their agreement, took their money, and moved to Chicago to rebuild my career. It took years to recover professionally. When Donovan cross-examined Gabriela, his approach was aggressive. Ms. Mendoza, isn't it true that you signed a confidentiality agreement as part of your divorce settlement? An agreement you're violating by testifying today? Gabriela met his gaze calmly. Yes, I signed under duress after being threatened. And I'm testifying today because there's a legal principle that confidentiality agreements cannot be used to conceal patterns of wrongdoing. Donovan's eyes narrowed. And what wrongdoing would that be exactly? The systematic use of marriage as a business tactic without the knowledge or consent of the spouse. The deliberate deception about the nature of the relationship, the coordinated effort to silence those who discovered the truth. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Hendricks studied Gabriella thoughtfully before turning to Donovan. "Any further questions, counselor?" "No further questions," Donovan replied tightly. The next witness was Rebecca Wilson, subpoenaed reluctantly to appear. Under oath, she admitted to a relationship with Scott that predated his marriage to Olivia and continued throughout it. She confirmed that her father's shipping company had secured exclusive contracts with Mitchell Shipping during the same period, contracts worth millions. "Ms. Wilson," Harrison asked, "did you understand that Scott Mitchell was married during your relationship?" Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but he told me it was a marriage of convenience, that his wife understood the arrangement." "Did you ever confirm this with Mrs. Mitchell directly?" "No, of course not." "And did you attend their wedding?" "Yes, I was invited as a business associate." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "And at this wedding, celebrating Scott's marriage to another woman, a woman you believed understood she was part of an arrangement, how did Mrs. Mitchell appear to you?" Rebecca hesitated. She seemed happy, in love. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. "I assumed she was a good actress." As the testimonies continued, the true nature of Scott's deceptions became increasingly clear. Financial experts detailed the complex shell game that had been played with the Mitchell family trust to conceal assets. Former employees testified about a corporate culture that treated marriages as strategic alliances to be negotiated like any other business deal. Throughout it all, Scott maintained his composure, until Harrison called their final witness of the day. The plaintiff calls Jessica Daniels. A collective murmur swept through the courtroom as a young woman entered. Slim, with auburn hair and scholarly glasses, Jessica Daniels walked to the witness stand with visible nervousness. Scott's face had drained of color. "Ms. Daniels," Harrison began after she was sworn in, "could you please tell the court about your relationship with Scott Mitchell?" Jessica glanced briefly at Scott before answering. "We met 2 years ago at a Harvard fundraiser. He approached me about a scholarship program through the Mitchell Foundation for graduate students in international politics." Her voice grew quieter. "The scholarship came with an apartment in Cambridge and expectations." "What kind of expectations, Ms. Daniels?" "Personal attention to Mr. Mitchell whenever he visited Cambridge. He said I had been specially selected for the program because of my potential in international relations." She paused. "I didn't realize until recently that the scholarship program doesn't actually exist. It was just a way to keep me available to him." "Were you aware that Mr. Mitchell was married during this time?" "He told me his marriage was a formality, that it was loveless and existed only on paper." Jessica looked directly at Olivia for the first time. "I would never have agreed to the relationship if I had known the truth. I'm so sorry." When Harrison asked about the apartment, Jessica confirmed it was purchased through a Mitchell shipping subsidiary, specifically for her use. The same subsidiary that had been promised to Olivia as part of her marriage settlement, but never transferred. "And what prompted you to come forward today, Ms. Daniels?" Jessica straightened her shoulders. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Mitchell told me the scholarship program was being terminated, that I needed to vacate the apartment immediately. When I asked why, he said his wife was causing complications and I needed to disappear for a while." Her voice grew stronger. "That's when I realized I wasn't the first, that this was a pattern, and I refused to be part of it anymore." During Donovan's cross-examination, he attempted to paint Jessica as an opportunist who had traded companionship for financial support. Her response silenced the courtroom. "Mr. Donovan, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through undergraduate school. I earned my place at Harvard through academic merit. The only mistake I made was believing that a prestigious family like the Mitchells would create a legitimate scholarship program instead of whatever this was." She looked directly at Scott. "I believed in my own potential more than I believed in his promises. That's why I'm in court today, despite the risk to my reputation and career." By the time the day's proceedings ended, the narrative had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a straightforward divorce case had evolved into an exposé of the Mitchell family's pattern of manipulation and deception spanning years, possibly generations. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. While Scott and his family slipped out a private entrance, Olivia stood on the courthouse steps with Harrison, Maya, Gabriella, and Jessica beside her. "Mrs. Mitchell, will you comment on today's revelations?" a reporter called out. Olivia stepped forward. "This case is not just about my marriage. It's about a system that treats people as commodities to be used for business advantage. It's about holding powerful people accountable when they abuse that power." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "And it's about making sure that no one else becomes a victim of this kind of calculated deception." That evening, as Olivia reviewed the day's events with Harrison in her apartment, breaking news flashed across her television screen. Mitchell Shipping shares drop 15% following courthouse revelations. The ticker below announced that several major clients were reconsidering their relationship with the shipping giant in light of the day's testimony. Her phone rang. Eleanor Mitchell's name appeared on the screen. "You've made your point," Eleanor said without preamble when Olivia answered. "Name your final terms." Olivia took a deep breath. "My terms haven't changed, Eleanor. Fair compensation for what was promised, full ownership of the Cambridge subsidiary, and no confidentiality agreement that prevents me, or Gabriella, or Jessica, or anyone else from telling the truth about what happened." "You're destroying a century of business reputation," Eleanor hissed. "Over what? A marriage that lasted less than a year?" "No," Olivia replied calmly. "You did that yourselves when you decided people were just tools to be used and discarded. I'm simply bringing it to light." There was a long silence before Eleanor spoke again. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning. They're considering removing Scott from leadership." For the first time, Olivia heard something like fear in the older woman's voice. "Is that what you want? To see him ruined?" "What I want is justice," Olivia answered. "Not just for me, but for everyone your family has used. If that means Scott faces consequences for his actions, then yes, that's exactly what I want." After ending the call, Olivia stood by her window, watching the lights of Boston shimmer in the darkness. She felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet certainty that she was, at last, standing firmly in her own truth. The negotiations lasted 3 more days. Behind closed doors, away from the media spotlight that now followed the Mitchell divorce with ravenous attention, lawyers exchanged proposals and counter-proposals while the Mitchell shipping stock continued its steady decline. Business partners distanced themselves. Clients reviewed their contracts. The damage that Eleanor had feared was materializing with each passing hour. On the 4th day, Harrison called Olivia with news. "They've accepted your terms, all of them." The final settlement exceeded what Olivia had initially requested. She would receive 30% of Scott's personal assets, full ownership of the Cambridge shipping subsidiary, now renamed Kamealoha Maritime, and a public acknowledgement of the deceptive circumstances surrounding their marriage. There would be no confidentiality clause restricting her from discussing any aspect of their relationship or the Mitchell family's conduct. In exchange, Olivia agreed not to pursue further legal action against the broader Mitchell enterprises, protecting the livelihoods of hundreds of employees who had no part in the family's deceptions. The day the agreement was signed, Scott appeared in person. He had lost weight, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. When they were momentarily alone in Harrison's conference room, he spoke for the first time since the courthouse revelations. "Was any of it real for you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Olivia studied the man she had once believed would be her partner for life. "Yes," she answered honestly. "All of it was real for me. That's the difference between us, Scott. You were playing a role. I was living my life." He nodded slowly, a flicker of what might have been genuine regret crossing his features. "For what it's worth, I did admire your spirit, your authenticity. It was something I never had." "You could have," Olivia replied. "You could have chosen honesty at any point. You still can." Scott's bitter laugh held no humor. It's too late for that. The board has voted. I'm out as CEO. Mother is temporarily taking control until the situation stabilizes. He signed the final document with a flourish. Congratulations, Olivia. You've done what no one else ever managed. You broke the Mitchells. No, Scott, she corrected him gently. You did that yourselves. I just refused to be broken along with you. As spring yielded to summer, Olivia found herself standing on a vacant commercial property in Cambridge, overlooking the Charles River. The brick building had once been a warehouse, its industrial bones solid beneath decades of neglect. Beside her, Maya surveyed the space with a contractor's practiced eye, while Elijah explored the empty rooms, his voice echoing with excitement. It's going to take a lot of work, Maya observed, but the location is perfect. Olivia nodded, already envisioning what the space could become. Kamialohas, it means beloved one in Hawaiian, a restaurant where food tells stories of heritage and belonging. Since the settlement, Olivia had been meticulously building a new foundation for her life. Kamialoha Maritime, the shipping subsidiary she now controlled, had been restructured with Gabriela Mendoza as Chief Operations Officer. Together, they had implemented ethical business practices and established a scholarship fund, a real one, for women pursuing careers in international commerce. Jessica Daniels had been their first recipient, now completing her graduate studies, while interning with the company. I want to understand how global business can operate with integrity, she had explained during her interview. I need to believe that's possible. The restaurant would be their next venture, a space where Olivia could honor her family's culinary traditions while creating opportunities for others seeking fresh starts. Maya would manage operations, bringing her organizational skills and warm presence to the front of house. Have you decided what to do about Eleanor's offer? Maya asked as they walked through what would become the dining area. 3 days earlier, Eleanor Mitchell had reached out with a surprising proposal. In exchange for Olivia's consulting on a corporate culture restructuring at Mitchell Shipping, Eleanor offered additional investment capital and shipping connections that would significantly benefit Kamialoha Maritime's expansion plans. I'm still considering it, Olivia replied thoughtfully. Part of me thinks it's just another Mitchell manipulation, but another part wonders if Eleanor is finally recognizing that their approach was fundamentally flawed. People can change, Maya suggested, when they have no other choice. That evening, Olivia met Eleanor at a quiet tea house in Boston's Chinatown, neutral territory far from the Mitchell social circles. The older woman appeared changed, the imperious confidence replaced by a more measured demeanor. Thank you for meeting me, Eleanor began after they were served. I recognize you have every reason to refuse. I'm curious, Olivia admitted. Why reach out now? The settlement is final. The media coverage has largely subsided. Mitchell Shipping is stabilizing under your leadership. Eleanor's hands curled around her teacup. Stabilizing, yes, but fundamentally changed. The Daodinro board insisted on a complete overhaul of practices. Not just public relations, but actual governance. She met Olivia's gaze directly. You exposed more than Scott's indiscretions. You exposed a systemic failure that nearly destroyed a century of business. And now you want my help to fix it? I want your perspective, Eleanor corrected, as someone who saw the flaws clearly and had the courage to challenge them. Mitchell Shipping needs to become the company we've always claimed to be, ethical, respectful, genuinely committed to the communities we serve. Olivia considered the request carefully. And Scott? What's his role in this new vision? Scott is taking time for reflection in Switzerland. The board has made it clear that any future role depends on demonstrated change. Eleanor hesitated. He's seeing a therapist. I believe it's the first time he's ever had to actually examine his choices. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours as they outlined a potential consulting arrangement that would bring Olivia's insight to Mitchell Shipping while maintaining her independence. By the time they parted, a tentative bridge had been established. Not friendship, certainly. Not family, but perhaps a relationship built on mutual respect. As summer turned to fall, Kamealoha's restaurant took shape. The industrial warehouse transformed into a warm, inviting space where exposed brick met Hawaiian-inspired design elements. The kitchen was equipped with both traditional and modern tools. The menu Olivia developed with her newly hired chef blended Pacific Island traditions with New England ingredients, telling the story of cultural connections through food. On opening night, the restaurant was filled with a diverse crowd. Gabriella and her team from Kamialoha Maritime occupied one large table. Jessica Daniels and fellow scholarship recipients another. Local business owners, Cambridge academics, and curious food lovers filled the remaining spaces. Notably absent were any members of the Mitchell family. Though Olivia's consulting work with Mitchell Shipping continued, she maintained a clear boundary between her past and her present. As she moved through the bustling restaurant, greeting guests and ensuring every detail was perfect, Olivia felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. She had reclaimed not just her financial security, but her fundamental sense of self, her identity as a woman of strength, integrity, and purpose. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the staff had completed their closing tasks, Olivia, Maya, and Gabriella shared a quiet moment at the bar. A bottle of champagne stood open before them, 3 glasses raised in celebration. "To new beginnings," Gabriella offered. "To truth," Maya added. "To reclamation," Olivia concluded. "Love everything that truly matters." As they clinked glasses, Olivia's phone chimed with a message. A photo appeared. Scott standing before a small cafe in Geneva, looking thinner but somehow more genuine than she had ever seen him. The text read simply, "I'm learning to be real. Thank you for that lesson at least." Olivia studied the image for a moment before setting her phone aside, returning her attention to the women who had become her chosen family. There would be time to consider forgiveness, not for Scott's sake, but for her own. For now, this moment of triumph and connection was enough. In the kitchen, the chef was already preparing for tomorrow, marinades soaking and doughs rising. On the wall near the entrance, a framed drawing hung in a place of honor, Elijah's colorful depiction of 3 figures standing before a building. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Every good plan needs a picture to start with." Outside, Boston's autumn wind carried the scent of salt from the distant harbor, reminding Olivia of another coastline, another home. She had come full circle, not to where she began, but to where she was always meant to be, standing firmly in her own power, surrounded by people who saw her true worth. She had left behind a marriage built on deception, but had discovered something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that she belonged first and foremost to herself. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Olivia's journey of reclamation has moved you as deeply as it moved us. Her transformation from a woman betrayed to a woman reborn reminds us all that our greatest power lies not in what others see in us, but in what we discover within ourselves. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about resilience and self-discovery. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If Olivia's story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that explore life's complexities and the triumph of the human spirit. Don't miss our upcoming content. There's always another powerful story waiting to be told. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.